This is my first time moderating. I'm usually one of the guests. This time, I put it on myself to interview these fantastic writers. But anyway, let's get started. We have John Jennings. John Jennings is a writer, artist. We have Rodney Barnes, writer, artist, or writer, producer, actor. And then we have Kevin Grevioux, writer, producer, actor. And so we're gonna do some quick intros. You guys tell us a little bit about yourselves before we get into this panel called Shook, which is based around the work that they do in the horror genre, okay? So let's start with you, John. Tell us a bit about where you come from and how you ended up being a writer.
So my name is John Jennings. I'm originally from Mississippi, actually born and raised. So I grew up around tales about spooks and haints and, supernatural entities. Also, too, the specter of racism, that's an obvious one, right? So, mix all that stuff together with a mother who is a massive horror fan and a massive action movie fan. And also a big fan of science fiction, mystery novels, Kolchak the Night Stalker, everything that you can think of that I really shouldn't have been watching with her, and that's kind of how I got into.
So she exposed you to horror. That was your first
everything,
experience.
like horror, science fiction, comics. She was the gateway to all of this stuff. So,
okay.
And so I kind of segued into doing a lot of writing probably, about 15 years ago as a comics writer. But my background's in graphic design. I'm a professor of media and cultural studies at UC Riverside, where I teach a course, actually, that these gentlemen actually have been guests in, Afrofuturism and the visual cultures of horror, right? So we talk about, constructions of race and representation, and also about Afrofuturism. So, and I'm also a publisher and a writer and an artist. So those are some of the things.
For Abrams?
For Abrams, yeah. Abrams Comic Cards. Yeah, we'll talk about that, but yes.
All right. Awesome. Mr. Rodney Barnes?
I'm Rodney Barnes. How did I find horror? I think when I was a kid, I didn't have much supervision, so I just watched whatever I wanted to watch. And I've probably been 6 feet tall since I was 7 years old, so I just walked in movie theaters. This is a long time ago. I saw The Exorcist in the theater when I was like a kid.
By yourself?
By myself. I saw The Omen. I remember seeing Amityville Horror. I just fell in love with them, and always felt like if I ever had the opportunity when I got older, because I always dreamed of being a writer, never thought it would come true. But I would sort of recreate that dynamic in my work. And so that led me to eventually going to Hollywood. I started in sitcoms, shows like My Wife and Kids, Everybody Hates Chris, and The Boondocks. And then later now dramas like Wu-Tang and American Saga, American Gods. And now Winning Time, Rise of the Lakers Dynasty on HBO, where I write, produce, and occasionally some people call it acting. I call it, I say words in front of the camera. But that's basically me.
Awesome, thank you. Kevin Grevioux.
So I guess my first my first exposure to horror was most likely Dark Shadows. I don't know, most of you aren't old enough to remember. Hey, oh yeah. And it was a horror soap opera that came on during the afternoon. So after school, I would turn it on, and you could see werewolves, versions of werewolves, vampires, Frankenstein, and all this cool stuff. A hand that would move by itself, And then it was
I was out. I was out. Nope.
Scooby-Doo. Then it was Scooby-Doo, which I thought was serious when I was a kid. But some of the things scared me, and I was like, okay, well, this is it. So that was my first exposure, and then I got into the Godzilla monsters, that was cool. And I was one of those guys who came to comic books kind of late. I was 12. And, I was in a completely different field in college. My thing was microbiology, but it was spurred by my love for science fiction. And if you look at dinosaurs, what dinosaurs are actually real monsters. So that, kind of came together and coalesced, and, my willingness or, desire to get into Hollywood and tell stories. And so that's where I am right now.
on your pursuit to become a professional writer, was it your intent to specifically write horror, or were you fancy? I mean, do you have other genres that are just as intriguing, or do you, if you had a choice, do you prefer to write horror?
Horror is one of, I guess, 4 or 5 genres that I'm interested in. You know, it's horror, science fiction, fantasy, action, adventure. You know, things of that nature. Dramas and comedies. I'm not a comedy guy at all, except for the Three Stooges. You know. Yeah. But you know, those are the genres that I really gravitate towards, and horror is just one of those.
Okay, because I know all 3 of you, and particularly you two, Rodney and Kevin, you guys write everything from Star Wars to Blade to Wu-Tang Clan, Everybody Hates Chris, and everything else. It's such, the genres are so different. I'm wondering how your mind works that you can wrap yourself around these different stories and be potent and keep the quality level up. You know, how does that work?
I look at it all as story. I really don't differentiate the genre so much. It's really what the characters want. I made it simple on myself early on, but I think as far as the making a living off of it, when I first came to Hollywood, I tried to sell horror stories. It didn't get a whole lot of traction with it. I got close once. I write a book called Philadelphia, and I wrote it as a movie first, and I had this big producer who was interested in making it. He said if I could put more white people in it, he would buy it. He would make it.
Did he literally say that?
He really did.
Wow.
I won't say his name, but he's in jail right now.
Oh, I wonder.
I remember going home that weekend and trying to find a way to get, it was a set in Compton. It's like, how can I get more white people? Like, maybe the police
Compton?
come, there's a white mailman, like anything, what can I do? And he said, I remember coming back to him and I had a couple of ideas, and he said, you know, I was thinking about it, and if Vampire in Brooklyn didn't work, and that had Eddie Murphy and Wes Craven,
I remember that.
probably Black Vampires won't work. Sorry.
Real quick,
Say it.
in your opinion, why do you think it didn't work?
Vampire in Brooklyn? I don't know if Vampire in Brooklyn knew what it wanted to be. Like, there were moments where I think comedy and horror fit, but my taste always went to the comedy coming from the scene, not trying to force it within the scene. And I think Eddie Murphy being one of the funniest men in the world, and certainly during that period of time.
Not to cut you off, but can a comedy and horror film actually work? Can horror be horror if there's if we're also laughing? You understand what I mean? Like,
I believe
can that work?
sometimes as a tension relief, you can laugh in a scene. Like some of my favorite horror films, like Dawn of the Dead and some of the others, they have horror. I mean, they have comedic moments within it. I think it's just a moment of where you place them and what's sacrificing, which one is sacrificing for what. Like if I'm trying to be funny when the moment is really requiring horror and fear, that's probably not the best thing. But you have some great filmmakers who are able to, you know, seamlessly weave. Alien had some humor in it. Aliens had some humor in it. Not a whole lot, but you had moments and characters typically who see the world through a funny prism. And that's typically how I try to write humor in horror films, is by doing horror work, is levity from the characters, not so much within the story itself.
Understood. Okay, awesome.
So I think I've just realized like fairly recently, over like the last like I don't know 5 or 6 years maybe, that I do want to primarily focus on horror. You know, it's just something I think it's because of the spectrum of what you can do with horror. Like I said, it's horror comedy, you know, horror adventure. There's like, you know, slow burn horror, the slashers. It's very diverse actually as a medium.
Right.
I also find as a genre, sorry. It gives me a certain way to talk about particular issues that I have with society, because I think very much about like social issues in horror, that kind of thing. I actually tripped out because I was actually like the first African American man to get the Bram Stoker Award. A lot of people don't realize that.
Okay.
For
Give it up for that.
For Kindred, actually, because you know Kindred is a horror story. That's the first thing.
What is your impression of Bram Stoker's Dracula?
Oh, I think yeah, I think it's fantastic. Yeah, yeah. It's actually, first of all, it's. I don't know how many people read the novel, actually. Yeah,
Okay,
so
wow,
some people
okay.
forget that it's an epistolary, right? So it's basically a series of letters to other different characters, and then the other thing too is that it's it's systemically or like symbolically, it's about old tensions or old ideas in tension with the modern world, Because you're thinking, I mean, literally, this guy is coming from like this older space and bringing dirt with him from the land,
Right.
and actually trying to infect the women of of modern England with his vampirism.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying? That kind of
Yes,
stuff. It's a great.
I had a conversation
great
with Kevin.
story.
I had a conversation with Kevin Grevioux last night about the rules of these monsters, vampires in particular, I think it was, and his opinion was sometimes, and you can explain it better than me. Sometimes depending who's writing the character, this writer's vampire can do this, but this writer's vampire can't do this or can do even more.
Yeah.
Do you think that's an issue when you're breaking the rules? Does it break continuity? Does it break the mythology of the character when you're just throwing in stuff for the convenience of plot device?
I think it depends. If it works, it works. My other thing too is that the idea of the vampire is like it's in every culture. Every culture across the world has a vampire creature, something like that. That's what's so interesting about him.
But is there any hard rules that you think that need to be followed when you say a character is a vampire and he can do this, that, and the third?
I think it depends. Like for instance, there's a sense of authenticity. Like if you're writing, say, an Adze, right, which is it's a vampire from, I think, Ghana that actually is a bunch of fireflies, right? Okay. And so it's like it turns a giant firefly and sucks blood. So if there's something that relates directly to that culture, I think that's important. But I think also, being that we're dealing with something that hopefully is like not real,
Yeah, right.
then I think you could probably like fudge according to like what your rules are. Like for instance, I mean, in Blade, for instance, vampirism is coming from science. They're like it's like an infection, that kind of thing, right? So
Okay.
Yeah, so that's really interesting. That's different than like magical vampires, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I'm not really sure about Blade because, like, I know in Underworld I use science, but Blade.
No, Blade too.
Yeah. I think they didn't mention bats or anything, and that's another thing too. Not all vampirism is based on the bat as a prevailing creature. There are other animals. The thing is, they all drink blood.
Right.
But sometimes daylight is an issue, other times it's not. Sleeping in the earth of your native land, sometimes that's important, sometimes it's not. But with the film industry, a lot of times the rules are amorphous. With any medium, the rules are amorphous. As long as they make sense and they're consistent, you can get away with anything.
Yeah. I was thinking about, like, for instance, the new version of Fright Night, for instance, where they talk about strands or like different species of vampires, right? That kind of thing. So that I think it depends, like Kevin's saying, like of the continuity in the world that you've built. Yeah.
Right. Because there's stories of stories that represent vampires in a philosophical way, where it's not actual vampires, because of the way it's written, this character's personality is. They have a blood-sucking personality.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
There's certain movies that are like that, like Martin, for instance.
Yeah.
Habit is another movie.
Right.
Where like vampirism is kind of like it's a metaphor for like the AIDS virus, that kind of thing.
Okay.
And also the one that just came out, the Transfiguration. Which is where it's dealing with like what's more like mental illness to a certain degree. So vampirism becomes like a symbol for something else.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm saying it's a spectrum.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
So, this
I
being
always wonder when they learn karate. Like, where do you go? Like, at what point do you take the karate lessons? But go ahead.
Nice going.
At the end of invitation.
Yeah, I just always wonder.
So this being Black History Month, and this is the Black Comics Day event, you are obviously Black writers. What do you think are, I don't want to say what makes you different, but do you think that you're bringing to the space of horror as Black writers that's maybe not coming from the traditional spaces in the film and comics industry. What do you guys feel that you're bringing a unique point of view, being black men yourselves?
I don't know. I'm obviously a black writer, but it's not race that brought me to the genre. You know what I'm saying? Now, having said that, with Underworld, this was my pitch. What if we did a werewolf movie, but made it a love story akin to Romeo and Juliet? But instead of Montagues and Capulets, we have werewolves on one side, but vampires on the other, and made it like this surrealistic, star-crossed interracial love story that spans a 600-year-old race war. You see what I'm saying? So that's the way I pitched it. And I remember Lynn Wiseman, the director, just was like sitting down looking at his feet and was like, oh man, is this gonna work? And the rest is history. You see what I'm saying? So in that aspect, you can use it as metaphors for a myriad of different things. Race sometimes, politics, or what have you. In fact, the best kind of science fiction or fiction is when it tries to explain a real aspect of the world in subtle metaphorical ways.
Right. Right.
So
that's your preferred approach.
Yes, pretty much.
And would you take? Do you take the same approach with your other genres?
Sometimes, but listen, sometimes you're gonna be a little bit more obvious because of the lack of, I'm gonna use this term, representation that we see, and I think that's important. Like at Marvel, they didn't have a whole lot of black superheroes, and the ones that they had were, ex-criminals, things like that. They spoke in a very,
jive turkey way.
Yeah. A very urban vernacular. Things like that. And so, I wanted to say, okay, look, there can be black superheroes who can do this. I mean, even though they say the Black Panther was a scientist, he had appeared in maybe a couple of panels in a couple of books, in a laboratory and didn't do anything. You know what I'm saying?
He was mostly in trees.
Yeah, true. And so when I created the Blue Marvel, it's like, no, I'm turning this on its head. I'm going to make sure that everyone knows he's a scientist and he did all these different things. You know what I'm saying? To break out of that stereotypical motif. So
Rodney, the route you're taking with Philadelphia, you're literally using real historical figures to tell your vampire story. You want to speak and tying that to the black experience in this country. You want to speak on that and how you approach it and why you took that approach?
Yeah, it's kind of like a critical race theory class. It's mostly, I wanted to humanize.
Ron DeSantis?
Yeah, it was
careful now.
It was more
I'm not trying to get shut down here. Sorry.
Really trying to. I love history, and I feel like a lot of times the emotion of history is sort of left on the table because you get moments. This person invented this. This person did that. There was slavery. There was civil rights movement. There were all of these things, but sometimes I think it's easy to forget that there were people who endured periods of time. And so I wanted to give voice to trauma, generational trauma, and to be able to put personalities to all of these fixtures and people who we sort of canonize as being iconic in history. Right. And if I could give them real dilemmas beyond being vampires, I felt like I could humanize them in a way that you could personalize history in a way that it would be more relatable. And in making it more relatable, we could sort of understand ourselves and why we're in certain situations and circumstances in America that we're in right now.
Now, did you have to pitch this before it was?
Not
it's
really.
Under Image, correct?
Yeah, it's under Image, but I sort of was Trojan horse. I said, the father and son are after this, who they think is a serial killer, and he's a vampire, and he happens to be John Adams, second president of the United States. I just said that part. The other part I just executed in the story, and you sort of pick it up as I go along.
Was there any resistance in telling the story the way you wanted to tell the story?
No, they thought it was crazy. It was like, this will never work. But so far, seems like it's working. But no one never really. I get more pushback in TV about stuff like that than I do in comics.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
And what is and because some of these folks at this show are aspiring writers themselves. When you say pushback, what does it generally revolve around?
A lot of people already come to the table with their idea of what a certain experience is. So if I'm assigned an area to talk about that has to do with history and the history involving black people, it's sort of already assumed what I'm going to write about.
Right.
Slavery, Dr. King, civil rights movement.
Right.
And any other periods outside of that are sort of unknowns, or they haven't been mined very much. So whenever I want to talk about those things, I'm doing a Jack Johnson story at HBO. That's a little bit different because I get an opportunity to talk about a period after the Civil War and during Reconstruction. And one of the reasons why I wanted the gig was so that I could talk about those things because they're rarely talked about. But more often than not, in conventional storytelling, when I talk about history, it's those moments when they talk about the black experience that particularly I'm regurgitating the same thing and trying to figure out a different way to spin the same idea.
Right.
So
give it a horror flair, spice it up a little bit, make it fresh, but still potent
Dr.
in
King
the messaging.
was a vampire
yes.
or something, and he made it through. Yes.
So, John, Mr. Jennings, Professor Jennings, you and your team have concocted a horror anthology called Shook. Yes?
Yes. Well, all of us are in it, too.
And you have, I was getting ready to say, you have various superstar writers involved in this project. Mm-hmm. Talk to us about what you're trying to do with Shook and how you ended up, the process of putting this thing together and your purpose of what you're doing with it.
Slapdash. I'm just kidding. Not exactly. That's what it was. So first of all, the publisher of the Shook piece is Second Sight Publishing. It's owned by some Mississippi-based, black-owned horror publisher. So me being from Mississippi, and I just really became really good friends with Marcus, who is he's like the creative officer, Marcus Roberts, and also Bradley Golden is the CEO. So we had been talking for a while about doing some work together, and they had made this kind of extra push that they wanted to do specifically horror comics, right?
Okay.
And I had always wanted to do something called Shook. I just thought it was a great idea for like a black-centered or Afrocentric name for some. I actually even did a art show in Atlanta called Shook.
Okay.
Yeah. So the whole piece is like based off of like old school horror anthologies, like EC Comics style.
Right.
So if you're a horror aficionado looking at something like Tales from the Crypt, you familiar with Tales from the Crypt? Yeah, so that TV show came out of like a comic series, right, from back in the day, from like in the 50s and such, or like Vault of Horror, and even before then, you had like anthologies on radio shows and stuff like, that idea of an interlocutor or a narrator that's a horror agent of some kind, like a witch or like a, or like some kind of like sorcerer or something like that, comes directly from radio. That's like radio shows used to do that.
What's the famous voice? What's his name?
Vincent Price. No.
Vincent Price.
People like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So basically, we are all fans of the genre, and when they said they wanted to do like a collection of like black authors doing this as an anthology, I was like, that sounds like a great idea. And I think they had already been talking to Rodney and Kevin. I think were already signed up. I think, or on the way to, and I just thought it was a great idea. I don't know. I mean, at the end of the day, when you publish things, you want to make money. That's one of the things. But it is an area that I think, as Kevin and Rodney have stated, like there's a dearth of representation in those spaces. Okay. And there are different voices that need to be seen because there's a lot of erasure of black history and black spaces. So we thought it'd be a really interesting conversation to do it that way. So yeah.
Well, comics usually takes a team to do just one comic. You have an anthology going here. How many different stories?
I think it's what? Shoot, I think it's 12 stories, 8 stories. I forget actually.
Okay, so
a bunch of stories.
how did you navigate putting the teams? Like, did you choose your own team, Kevin?
Yeah, well, I know a lot of writers. A lot of artists. And, letterers, colorists, things like that. So, I put my team. I'm doing 2 stories, and so I put my team together.
So the onus was on you.
Yeah.
And
same with me. Yeah, same with me. And
same with you.
And I think I found Rodney's artist actually with David Brain.
And I don't do that.
Yeah, it's like I wrote a script. Yeah, so for me, like my first story though, which is really cool, is called The Breaks. Right.
Okay.
I wrote that story like almost 20 years ago.
Yeah, really?
It was just sitting on my hard drive, and it actually had it drawn. Charlie Gobil is the artist on it, right? And it was an old idea that I had with my friend Damian Duffy.
Okay.
We wanted to do a Twilight Zone kind of anthology ourselves called Urban Creep, actually.
Okay.
We still want to. And, once they approached me about it, I was like, well, this is a perfect time to finally publish this story that I did like years ago. And it was like the first script that I ever wrote for another artist to draw. Like,
wow.
So it's been like sitting there. And the other one is called Lady of Rage, which is like an anti-domestic abuse story. And again, I secured my artist.
So that's two hip hop terminologies. Shook, Lady of Rage,
in the breaks.
So
There's gonna be a hip hop horror piece.
So do you guys want to speak on how? Because I know you do a course on hip hop and comics. Yes, no.
Used to.
You guys want to speak on that a little bit? And you do Wu-Tang, the American Saga. Do you do anything related to hip hop?
Nothing about hip-hop.
Man,
I'm too
don't
old.
let him.
Do you guys want to speak on how? Because I personally, I consider myself a child of the hip hop era. I was introduced to hip hop through The Message when I was in 2nd grade, but it really came into my life in the mid '80s. But I noticed that hip hop artists had a strong connection to the comic book community. A lot of the references, a lot of their imagery, and so forth. So, how does hip hop relate to your writing? Like, how does it connect with you guys? I guess is what I'm saying with what you do, if it does at all.
Well, somewhat. I mean, it's according to the period of time that I'm operating in. I mean, I can say it was a funny thing when I first talked to the RZA from the Wu-Tang Clan. I think within the first 10 minutes, he started talking to me about, he didn't know I read comic books. He was like, do you know who Tony Stark is? And then he's Iron Man. And then he started talking.
Grilled you.
Yeah, and because I knew, I was like, yeah, man, like, why are you asking me these things?
Yeah.
And even when I went to Staten Island, was working on the show, we talked a lot about comic books, and it was all sort of mixed in Shaolin, martial arts movies. All of this stuff was sort of infused into Wu-Tang, just their music. With me, again, it's project to project. Certainly for Wu-Tang, the comic book stuff helped the hip-hop because they were integrated.
Right.
Other things, not as much. It's according to if it crosses a certain stream of time. I think in American Gods, they were going to have one of the characters in New York, I think it was Ricky Whittle's character, he was going to be into hip-hop, but the British and hip-hop is a different relationship. But yeah, not as much as probably with you.
Okay. And they even, I don't know if you know, but in the early 90s, there was a moment where they had, there was a buzz for horror rap.
Yeah.
You guys remember that at all?
Yeah, Snoop did a couple
horrorcore.
of things. Snoop did a couple of things. Was it Bones?
It was it didn't last too long because I think hip hop its strength is coming from a real space, not a what I mean is it comes from life. It comes usually the more successful rappers are speaking on their reality, and I think a lot of the horror stuff was coming. It was kind of contrived, like it wasn't coming from a real space. So I didn't think it stuck. It didn't really stick with me. I thought technically it sounded good, but it didn't resonate on any real level.
Right.
I didn't think it was in it. I don't know, maybe if someone does it right, it'll work. But I think about that with all writing. I think it really resonates when it comes from some type of real space. So that said, do you guys, when you're writing the other genres, is there a bit of your real life that you try to put into your work, Or do you separate that depending on what the project is?
I don't think I've ever written anything worth anything that didn't have a piece of me in it. I mean, Philadelphia is my relationship with my father and my son. Virtually, I try to find, if it's not from a macro place culturally, because I look at that more so than race per se, and how stories are told. If I can't find me in it, it's hard for me to really put the feeling part in it. I can go through the mechanics, but you probably get a better version of my work if I see myself in it, or I can empathize or identify somewhat with the story.
Okay, definitely. How about you, Kevin?
Yeah, definitely. Like, let's say, Underworld had to do with some experiences of interracial dating I've done. You know, when it comes to
TV timeout.
yeah. You know, when it came to the Blue Marble, you know, I played football. I was a science major. You know, things like that. I had a fascination with the military because when I was in ROTC. So, you know, I kind of bring that stuff together in that particular character. So, you know, like Rodney said, you know, you bring a piece of yourself with everything you write. You know, the good writers do.
You actually volunteered for ROTC?
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't go into the military.
It just reminded my dad made me go for my first year of high school. This will teach you discipline. I don't need discipline, but okay. So yeah, I wasn't a very good soldier, but I did get a marksman badge. I was
that's good. That's
good at shooting stuff. How about you, John? Do you have when it comes to adding your personal experiences to your stories?
Yes, all the time. I want to back up a little bit too, because I actually, I love hip hop as well. I didn't get a chance to answer that part.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah. So the thing about I did actually use there's this book me and Damian and Stacey Robinson, Damian Duffy and Stacey Robinson did called Kid Code. It's a time travel story.
Okay.
And I wanted to freestyle the structure of it, right? And so what I did was I actually how like when you do paneling on a page, right?
Yes.
So what I did is I actually instead of writing the script first, I actually freestyled it and did and I used dice. Like I used to roll how many panels per page.
Really?
And stuck to it. And then let chance decide what the structure was going to be. And then we actually pass it off and stuff. So it was like call and response, and we actually put that kind of idea into the structure of the book. That was fun. It was crazy. It stressed Damien out because he's so used to it. Anyway, but as far as myself, yeah, I mean one of the first horror pieces I wrote, the main character was called Tony Pitch, and he looked just like he was me essentially as an art teacher and stuff. It was about an art teacher and an art practitioner that could actually channel the spirits of dead slaves or black people who had died traumatically, and he would paint them, and then it would release their spirits, that kind of thing, right?
Okay.
So yeah, that's one of the first but that was loosely based off of my background, based off of me. He was originally from Mississippi, and migrated to Chicago, that kind of stuff. For me though, it's when I'm thinking about horror, I think about the utilitarian nature of it, right? I want to, as they were saying earlier, there's a certain amount of distance that you can put between yourself and an actual subject by speculating around it, that kind of thing, right? So I found that, not only is it cathartic for me, but it also is a way for me to do some problem solving around things that actually get under my skin, that kind of thing. Box of Bones, was inspired by just the amount of violence against people of color. And what happens when they don't get justice, and
right. Yeah,
because to me, revenge is poor man's justice, essentially.
Right.
So that kind of idea. And these are things that I theorize around in my own work, too, So I think about race a lot as a construction. I do.
They're watching. Watch what you say.
I do. The thing is, yeah, because I even have a bunch of theories around the ethnogothic is a construction that I came up with. The idea of racecraftian horror is another thing that I think about a lot, and cosmic horror, and that kind of thing, and how we can kind of flip stuff on its ear,
Now, you have a very real connection to the Kindred series. Are you guys familiar with Kindred? Kindred? That's on what streaming service?
It was on FX.
FX.
It's been canceled.
Yeah, but you technically didn't work on the film side of it, yes?
No. Yeah, that didn't work on that. Contractually, if they did, then they would have to pay us.
For those that don't know, John Jennings here is the artist and co-writer of the adaptation of the Octavia Butler's book, Kendrick book, and Parables of the Sawyer.
That's correct. Parallel Sword. That's right.
Yeah, and both bestsellers.
Yes.
Yes. So and then Kendrick. Oh, am I saying it right, Kendrick?
Kendrick. Yeah.
Kendrick became a streaming show, and but I don't think they tapped you in the production.
At first they did. At first they did a production, but I think somebody read our contract, and they were like, "Oh, maybe we shouldn't talk to them."
Okay.
Make sure you get all this. I'm just kidding.
And you said the show was canceled.
Yes,
Do you have any thoughts on why, or? I mean, I know there could be a ratings issue, but
it could be. It's a lot of different issues. I think first of all, I think that personally, I felt it strayed too much away from the source material. Second thing is that because it is it's essentially like a slave narrative. I think that sometimes people are kind of enslaved to death, that kind of thing. And I think that if you don't know the oeuvre, so to speak, of like Octavia Butler's work, then people maybe didn't watch because of that. So,
there is a contingent of, and I'm guilty of it myself. There's a contingent of black folks who are kind of, it's getting louder that we're kind of tired, for lack of a better word, tired of seeing slave movies and black trauma constantly put out in the film. So do you guys have, the three of you have an opinion about that sentiment?
Well,
agree, don't agree?
Yeah. I mean, I understand it, but I think what happens with cultures is that you look at the crucible of the most pathos, and then you kind of use that as a way to generate stories. And for the Jews, it's been the Holocaust. War, for instance, has always been something people write stories about and dovetail, into other issues. For us, it's slavery, and the civil rights movement or Jim Crow or whatever. So I don't think there's anything wrong with it. It's just that a lot of these, producers, that's all they go to, and that's the problem.
It's expected from writers like yourself.
Yeah. So if you don't do that, then they question your authenticity as a black writer or creator sometimes. That's what I don't like.
Okay. Understood.
Yeah, and it gets tiresome because you're trying to explain to white folks what black folks are actually like and what we like, and they say, well, it'll never sell. And I'm like,
right.
Yeah.
Do you have an opinion on it, Rod?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a sameness sometimes when you keep going to the same well. You had the slaves that spoke really well in 12 Years a Slave. They were kind of Shakespearean slaves. And then you had your other slaves that kind of your traditional, we's us slaves. So, but still at the end of the day, it's still an idea that I think it feeds into a certain narrative that I think at a certain point you want to see evolve past just that idea. I think the source material of Kendrick would have made a great story. And that's the issue more than anything else. And I think it's told with very little nuance oftentimes. You just see the part like, oh, this is the whipping part.
Right.
This is the running part.
Right.
It's like there's like it is. It's like five things in every slave movie. Oh, you see a black man behind a tree.
Right.
It's like it's the same thing.
Right.
That's the baby. But we made it. We're gonna hold the baby up to the moon.
Yeah.
And I think there's so much more rich stuff there to be mined in the experience from then to now that is left. Left on the field.
So basically, it's a gatekeeping problem, as far as like bringing new material to the forefront.
It's weird. You have some people who say that that's if you're not telling that story, it's not the real experience. Like they look at that as
well, you ain't black.
Yeah, it's like
where's your slave card?
It's almost like having to be in the hood. Like every story has to come from the hood. So
right, because the '90s was all about gangbanging movies.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Yeah. I think all of these stories can be told. I think there's space for it all, but there needs to be, basically there's an imbalance. And that's where I think that sentiment's coming from. Because I personally love gangster movies of all, I love my Italian mafia movies. I love my, hood gang banging movies. I love all of it if it's done well. But if it's too much of one thing, it's like sugar. Eat too much sugar, you get a cavity.
Yeah.
But
that's America, though.
Yeah,
right? I mean, that's you know, if it sells, they're gonna make more of it. You know, that's the thing. I will say this though. Dang it, man! Where y'all going?
It's you, man.
Everybody's leaving San Diego. Trauma is part of horror. That's actually a part of it. So like when I see something like there was this TV show called Them, that was it was co-produced by I think Lena Waithe, right? People complain, oh, it's torture porn, it's black, it's black torture, and I was like, my problem with it was it seemed like they weren't necessarily like horror fans, that was my issue with it.
Okay.
Yeah, I feel like they was right. It was that was that kind of thing. I have issues with it, but for the most part, the things that they were complaining about, I was more about like genre issues or like how it was framed and stuff. But trauma is part of horror,
Right,
So if you're gonna do black horror, then you're gonna deal with trauma, either psychological or physical, and that's part of the genre,
Right.
And horror is the thing that you're left with, by the way.
Right.
You have terror, is a fear like physical harm to your body or like dread, and these different like the stages of it, right? But at the end of the day, that thing that's in your head after you leave the movie theater, that's horror. Right, it's more psychological, Anyway,
Right. I think as real quick, I just think of course I'm black, so my experience, and I think what a lot of black folks are dealing with when it comes to the stuff that's fed to us through the media in the entertainment package, kind of jives with or contrasts. I don't want to say contrast, but sometimes it's trauma overload, because usually there's something in the news that happened in real life that's traumatic, and then we have to see it in the movies and in the comics and the games and everything else, and sometimes it's just too much. I gotta go watch Fast and Furious or something. I gotta escape from this. So So it can be hard to navigate, because we're all human. We all want our candy and popcorn and all that stuff. So we're more the same than we are different. But I want to throw it to the audience so you guys can ask them questions. But before I do that, I want to get each one of you to tell me your top 3 horror flicks.
You first.
Starting with you, Kevin. Give me your top 3 all time. Either horror movies or horror monsters. Go for it.
Okay, well, okay, monsters is easier. So, King Kong is kind of my top one. That's the one I want to see.
King Kong, number 1. Okay.
Okay, then it's the Mummy. In fact, it's probably King Kong Mummy, And
Why the Mummy?
You know what, man? When I saw that first image, because I saw a lot of this stuff in magazines, before I saw the actual movies. Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So and it's like, man, that is cool. So, the Mummy, it was just, I think I saw the Mummy 2 on Johnny Quest, an episode of Johnny Quest. Yeah. And I was like, my goodness. I love that. I love that character. So it was King Kong the Mummy, and
number 3.
I would say.
Don't be embarrassed.
I'm gonna say Godzilla. Yeah. I would say Godzilla.
Wait a minute.
Yeah.
Where's Beth? I know you.
Yeah.
Because you think Godzilla's a horror character?
Well, wait. You said monster.
Stepping on people.
You said monster.
Well, do you think he's he's a kaiju, and is he a monster in the same sense as Frankenstein?
If you look at the first one, yeah.
You think so?
If you look at the first one and what he metaphorically represented,
okay,
it was all about horror, because he represented the Japanese reaction to the atomic
nuclear,
bomb.
the bomb.
Yeah,
right.
yeah, exactly. So you talk about trauma. Exactly. And
Okay.
so this is like,
I dig it.
Yeah.
I get it.
So yeah.
Because monsters can represent categorical, destruction.
Okay,
Yeah.
because he's a hero to me. He's a
He
good
is-
guy.
He is now. But when I first
I
saw
like
it,
when Godzilla
Not
had
to the people
Gotsuki
getting
and they were,
stepped on.
rumbling.
The people getting stepped on don't like it.
Burn up with radiation,
Yeah, that's the original Godzilla. He's much better
now
now.
I will
He's
tell
had
you my
therapy.
favorite horror movie of all time.
relative.
Yeah, right.
My favorite horror movie of all time is probably The Thing from Another World, 1951.
Okay.
And that, to this day, maybe not to this day, but there was a part where the Thing was in the green room, and he opens the door, and the Thing is right there, and swings at him. They slam the door shut, and they shoot it, and I'm like,
It freaked you out there a little bit?
Until I was well into my 20s, I still jumped. Like, so I thought that was cool. But that's my favorite all-time horror movie.
Okay.
I do love that movie.
Yeah.
Rodney, your top three.
The remake is, I would say, The Exorcist, The Thing, and Blackula. Just cause.
Blackula.
But yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
wait, was that in order?
No. They change.
Okay, so
They
why
changed.
Exorcist?
Because it felt real. It was. It wasn't just about the demonic possession. It was what was going on in the family. They were going through a divorce and guilt and lack of faith. With religion. There was so many other.
Wait a minute, how old were you when you watched
ideas.
this?
I mean, I've seen it 1,000 times, but
When you first saw it,
8, 9.
did all that stuff you just mentioned resonate? Were you like, you're a deep kid?
No, she was jumping off the bed, and Mama, you should have seen it. She had this cross, and it was that. But
Because I
then
believe most people
as
go
time
off their
went on.
first impressions of a film.
I mean, it
sticks with
affected
them.
me. It stuck with me, and I was going to Bible study, asking questions. So it was, it had a profound effect. on me.
Okay.
But and The Thing, and then Blackula.
And Blackula, and what about Blackula? What attracted you or made that one stick to you?
Same thing. I mean, I love
And
the
of
Hammer
course,
films.
and of course he's writing Blackula right now, or he wrote Blackula, the relaunch, which is available here at Black Comics Day, and you have signed copies here at Nuclear Comics.
Yeah.
Sorry about that plug, but
Yeah, no,
go ahead.
all good. I think with Blackula, I love the Hammer films, the Christopher Lee, Peter Cushing stuff, and the original Universal monsters, and a lot of stuff that Kevin was talking about. But I never saw black people in them. And so every once in a while we pop out and say, yeah, it went that way. But other than that, we weren't really part of the story.
Oh, man, that's a bad
Yeah. But then I got an opportunity. My mother went on a date. She took me with her. And to see,
I read this story.
didn't nobody want to babysit me. And so we went to Blackula. And it was that experience where it was a theater full of black people. It was interactive because black people talk back to the theater and to him. And it was like an incredibly black experience there was a feeling other than just the movie of, I want to do this. Then as I got older, I saw the problematic stuff. When he became Pharaoh, his afro got bigger and his lapels got bigger. I don't know how that worked, but it was like, all right, if I ever got an opportunity to do this differently, I would extricate a lot of the stuff that was problematic and highlight, because William Marshall, who played Blackula, or Prince Mamuwalde, was a Shakespearean trained actor. And I always felt like Bela Lugosi got to be sophisticated. And this brother's running around the hood like, jumping from police and just different stuff. And I would try to elevate the idea of him to be on par with what I'd seen when I was a kid.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, Mr. Professor Jennings, your top three. Movie or monsters?
I'm gonna do monsters first. Was there no Korean movie?
No, you're good.
Anyway, it's interesting because first of all, like the idea of the monster, from the I think it's the Latin monstrum, is about warnings from the divine.
Now we're being edgy. Okay.
I'm just saying.
Now,
I just want to say that's what
we're
they're
in
for.
class
They're
now.
portents. But anyway, I like monsters that are more amorphous and shapeshifty. So my top three would probably be Pennywise, right?
Ooh, Pennywise.
Pennywise
okay.
is quite terrifying. The idea of it, and also
Stephen King.
Freddy Krueger, right? Because nothing is more terrifying
like
than a monster you can't escape when you go to sleep. You're like,
Did you ever actually have a real dream with Freddy Krueger in it?
No.
Has anyone ever had a real dream with Freddy Krueger? You did?
No, I never.
I'm fearing that one.
I don't remember my dreams actually.
You don't?
Nope. I don't remember
Okay.
them. That's because I'm always in a fugue state.
So if Freddy was there, you forgot.
Yeah, exactly. I forgot. Yeah.
Okay.
The other one is The Thing. Yeah, The Thing. Yeah, like John Carpenter's though, which I feel is a better movie.
I gotta go with him.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, it's just yeah, I'm sorry. I like that.
See, I think that was science fiction, but that's me.
But there was but sci-fi horror.
I know.
Okay, you know what? Never mind. All right, this is the conversation we've had many times before. So I'm kind of tied though. It's like I can't say the best one because there's so many different kinds. And there's the Thing, right there again. The Thing, by John Carpenter, but another John Carpenter movie that I think is really, really underrated is, I love that movie too, Prince of Darkness. Prince of Darkness, I think, is super, super underrated. That movie, Creed, it gets up under my skin every time I remember the first time I saw it. It's a wild. Have y'all seen that movie? Yeah, I think it might be my. It ties.
Who starred in that film? Who was the star?
Donald Pleasance was probably the biggest star in it. Actually, I think about it. That was his last movie.
Was it?
Wow. The brother, the Chinese actor from Tremors, and I can't think of his name right now. And Parker. He played in Simon and Simon. That dude. Parker, what's his face? You know what I'm talking about? Parker, Simon. You know Simon and Simon. Yeah. I'm kind of old. I used to watch it. Parker Stevenson. Yeah, he's like another character that's in it. But it's very kind of Lovecraftian, and it's about these physics students. They go to do some field research on this order of priests who have the same dream over and over again, and it turns out they're guarding Satan essentially. Oh wow! But not the way you think of it. It's really, really beautifully strange, you know. And yeah, I love that movie though.
Okay, awesome. So we're running against it a little bit. So does any of you guys have questions for our panelists? David?
And this is for you, John. Yeah. So you talked a little bit about using horror as a scenario for real life. Yeah. You know, much like Twilight Zone, you know, like issues. And can you just elaborate a little bit?
Sure. All right. Well, I mean, to a certain degree, like science fiction, like Kevin was saying, and actually speculative fiction in general, I think, is always giving us like a metaphorical space or an allegory to play around with. I think most great storytelling is doing that, right? Where you can kind of like distance yourself to a certain degree from a particular subject. Like I said, for me, when we did Box of Bones, which the elevator pitch is Afrocentric Hellraiser, right? But instead of like these demons inside of it, it's these it's like these creatures that are like informed by like racist practices. Like there's a like there's one called the Burden that represents slavery. There's one that represents like, you know, violence against black men. There's one that represents like lynching, you know, that kind of stuff. It's called the Wretched, actually, and it's like this sentient lynching tree, and it has like these jigaboo demons hanging from it. It's terrifying. Yeah,
it sounds terrifying.
Yeah, it's messed up. Yeah, yeah. So the thing is, it's like, you know, so I'm thinking about like how actual real life issues are horrific in nature. Like for instance, I don't like to look at like black people dying in media. Right. I have not seen the George Floyd tape, not seen Tyree Nichols, not going to see any of that. I cannot stand like actual violence, but I can actually utilize like storytelling to, you know, kind of like delve into like more like Afro-surrealic space to actually create like constructs that I can deal with that way.
Compartmentalize
exactly,
things. Right.
Exactly.
I got you. Yeah. Any other questions? Right here.
I had a question. I'm not going to lie, I was expecting to hear more about Jordan Peele. So I want to know, do you guys know Productions?
Wait a minute, who?
Jordan Peele.
Are you talking about the comedian? Yeah. He makes horror movies? I'm so messing with you.
He's playing with you. He's playing.
Let me text you right now. Have you not seen Nope?
Exactly.
I think she wants to know your opinion of Jordan Peele's work.
For me, it's Nope. I think that's his best movie. Yeah.
I know Jordan really well. We actually have a project together. He gave me a blurb for my book. We have the same agent. Yeah, we do. I like Get Out the most. There's always a point in Jordan's movies where I'm not smart enough. Like, I don't know why the shoe was pointing up when the monkey in Nope. And I don't know when in Us why the people were walking over the mountain. But I like the idea of his movies a lot. And I like the idea that it's more of a Hitchcock type thing, and it's different than what everybody else is doing, and I clearly hear his voice. So I love the fact that he's doing his thing and he's doing his thing his way. And I think it actually makes it easier for us to tell our stories because the rising tide lifts all boats. So stuff like his stuff, Black Panther, any of these things that are super successful make it easier for other ideas to be heard.
I think Jordan Peele is, to me, Jordan Peele, and I'll let you go real quick. I think Jordan Peele is what I call he samples styles. Like him and Tarantino, the two of them, when I see their work, they're like, oh, you're doing your Hitchcock thing right now, or you're doing your Spielberg thing, you're doing your Stephen King thing, whatever. Like there's distinct things that they're doing that's not necessarily something.
It's an homage.
Yes. So I don't know if he has. Would you say he has his own style of voice?
That's
Yeah.
a style. I mean, I think even
Or
with
is that
Tarantino,
it?
That's a style. I mean, being able to take other things and other shots and other things.
A gumbo.
That's a thing.
Yeah.
Because I don't think it's anything new under the sun.
Okay.
No. A style is a system of procedures
Okay.
that result in an aesthetic.
Okay.
Yeah, I haven't seen Nope yet. I've been trying to. I get to a certain point, and I just don't finish. Didn't like Us, but I was intrigued by Get Out. And I say to myself, because I know a lot of people who are jealous of that film, and they say, why didn't I think of that? But the reason why a lot of blacks think that is because we've all had kind of that experience. You're the only brother in an all-white environment, and it's like, suppose something go down. You know what I'm saying? What happens then? But only a comedian, I think this is where his brilliance comes in, could have made a horror movie out of that. You know what I'm saying? And that's the way I looked at it. It was really crazy, but that was my favorite one of his.
Yeah, I was going to quickly say that it took him a while to make Get Out too. Like he basically, he
At one time, I was thinking, I don't understand what this is.
Right, I don't know what this. Yeah, exactly. When first time I got a chance to talk to him about it, he was like, he wrote it over like a decade or so, right? Put it in, take it out, put it in this thing.
Okay.
So really, really well done screenplay. But,
Okay. Yeah. Did you have a question back here?
So I read somewhere that people like Jordan Peele, because they work in sketch comedy, live on stage, as a comedian, they tend to do well in horror because they know they have a good anticipation of the audience.
Oh, I see what you're saying. They're good with timing, and
yeah.
it's like a punchline to them.
That's exactly
the jump
what it is.
scares.
Yeah. Horror and comedy are very closely related. I mean, comedy is very violent
That makes
too.
that makes a lot of sense.
I have my students writing a 2-sentence horror story project right now. I said, think of it like a
Okay.
joke.
Okay, awesome. Got you. Is there any other questions? You have a question here?
Not to take up too much time. We've heard everything about horror. We're at Black Comics Day. What is your guys' favorite comic book?
He wants to know do you have a favorite superhero or comic book character?
Well, yeah. Well, now it's Blue Marvel, but before then, you said Black Hero, right? Okay, yeah. Well, definitely Blue Marvel. But before then, just regular heroes. It was probably Fantastic Four and Hulk were my favorites.
Okay. Rodney, you have a favorite superhero or comic?
Swamp Thing has always been my favorite. Man, who else? I like Jon Stewart. I'd say those two sort of stand out above most others.
Okay.
Let's see. So, of course, like one of my favorite heroes. I mean, he's come up an anti-hero is John Constantine. I'm a big John Constantine fan. I love a trickster character. I have a character called Frank Half Dead Johnson that's kind of like inspired by him. My favorite superhero actually is this blind ninja, urban ninja character. Maybe you heard him, Daredevil. I'm a massive Daredevil fan. I just loved that character. But yeah, it's like, you can kind of see, you can see a little bit of the shape around. It's because of his mutation. Did my tail Matt.
Awesome. Well, did you have something?
I was gonna say like my favorite one now is Ghostlight though.
John is currently writing the new Silver Surfer series, Ghostlight. So if you haven't picked that up, check it out. Perhaps Nuclear Comics. Do you have copies of Ghostlight? Yeah. Silver Surfer.
I do not have any.
Okay. Well.
I'm so sorry.
Well, find it at your local comic shop. Well, that wraps it up for the Shook panel. I want to thank our special guests here, John Jennings, Rodney Barnes, Kevin Grevioux. I wish you gentlemen more success and the best of times. Thank you so much for allowing us to be in your presence and pick your brains, and it's been wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you, brother.
And thank you guys for coming to Black Comics Day. We hope you're having a great time. Please visit all the artists here. They have fantastic work. Even just to say hi and check out their work, support it, and so we can come back next year and do it even bigger. We have keep wanting to say Vortex. Nuclear Comics right back here. He is a local comic shop. He is the very first actual comic shop to vendor here.
Wow.
And he has everything you're looking for in comics, whether it's Black comics or other comics. So check him out. He's local to San Diego, North Park. And then inside, of course, we have all of our other fantastic artists. And Rodney will be at his table signing Blackula and all of the other fantastic work he does, along with Kevin Grevioux. Kevin, you have so much stuff I can't even name.
Ridiculous.
But he's got Marvel, Image, DC, the whole nine at his table. Make sure you guys come and visit these guys and get some of their work to take with you home and spread the word. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Awesome. That was great.
Great job, man. Yeah.